In 2015, I had the opportunity to come and present at the Dayton area TEDx, which was a great experience, and I had the opportunity to talk about the future of augmented and virtual reality. And so for those of you who may not be familiar, augmented reality is the ability to use a phone or a device to project digital content or 3D objects into a physical space, like a hologram if you've ever seen Star Wars. And virtual reality is the ability to put on a headset and immerse yourself in a fully digital space or a new world. And so we had good reason at that time to care about what the future was going to look like in these emerging spaces. These were among the most hyped business areas of opportunity that we've seen in recent years. We had just founded this startup, we had just raised a significant amount of money, and we had bet heavy that AR and VR were going to emerge first in the area of home goods, so kitchens, bathrooms, living rooms, dining rooms, the ability to design and visualize your space. So as I stood there that day in 2015, I knew I was probably wrong. And most people are in business. And even if you're right about what will happen, you're probably wrong about when it will happen. And in business, being off just a couple of years can be disaster. And so the question is, as an entrepreneur or anybody going into an emerging space, how do you forge ahead? How do you have a sense of confidence? How do you bring other people along with you? So whether it's your investors or whether it's your employees or even your family, how do you create a sense of confidence as a leader that you're headed in the right direction, or even if you know you're wrong, that you'll eventually figure that out? And so what I have for you today are 5 tips or techniques or methodologies that I've picked up over my career, along with the support of good mentors, and hopefully they can be valuable to you as well. But before we get started, let's get into AR and VR a little bit, just so we can experience it. So this here's a video of a customer going through an AR, VR experience, and so she's home shopping. She's interested in this couch. She doesn't know if it's going to fit, if it's going to look good. She can digitally, so that's actually a 3D model, not a real couch, and place it in her physical space. Here's another example of where the customer comes into a store. So she's using 3D models, which is sort of the underpinning of AR and VR, and placing them in her space. And she can very quickly build out her room, and it could be a kitchen or living room or bathroom. And then what she's done, she can put on a headset and actually visit that room that she just built. So you'll see her do that here. So what's exciting about this is obviously it's a very utilitarian use case for AR and VR. We find that people who use the tools spend about 50% more, and they're also about 80% less likely to return the product. So we're very fortunate we got there. We did get there about 2 years later than we expected to, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes. There we go. So before we get into the tips and techniques, let's kind of time travel back to 2015 just so we all have a mental picture of what was being talked about at the time. So do you all remember Google Glass? So this was out from Google. This is CES 2015. Billions and huge manufacturing plants being set up to create these. Billions being invested. And think about this, and it was a complete swing and miss. Probably a $60 billion swing and miss. And think about that for a second, that, we're, local startup entrepreneurial types. How do we have a chance of predicting the future when somebody like Google, with all of its resources and all of its money and all of its intelligent people, can swing and miss like this? The other thing that was happening in 2015 is Mark Zuckerberg had just bought Oculus Rift, which was sort of the first commercially viable VR headset. And if you follow their projections, we were supposed to be having about 50 million of these shipped a year by now. We may be closer to 5. Right? So a big swing and miss in terms of timing. I will tell you that this market is starting to emerge. There's also this company called Magic Leap, a very secretive startup that was supposed to sort of take the world by storm, had raised over $2 billion, and we've really yet to see a commercially viable product out of them. But the vision is that we'd all be wearing these headsets and walking around with virtual objects in front of us. And just socially, what was happening at the time is all the guys, for some reason or another, started to look like hipster lumberjacks. So let's fast forward to 2019. So what did happen in the space of AR, VR? Well, Pokemon Go got very popular. It was funny, we were all like, what are all these zombies like doing in this park, like walking around with their phones? Became a huge hit. Oops. This thing happened, the Snapchat, face filter, for better or for worse. And it turns out AR for home goods and furniture actually took off, which I think is the first time I may have been right in my career, but it was very exciting. It took off a little later, but it became a very popular use case for the technology. And then finally, I got into the hipster lumberjack look. So let's talk about what are some ways that we can sort of find confidence when we know we're probably wrong. And one of the first, there's this concept in business or in behavioral psychology called confirmation bias. And in short, it means that once you've created your own view, or more importantly, even espoused a view, your ability to see an alternative view goes down significantly. And so one of the views in the AR, VR space is that this was largely a place that male millennial gamers were going to, create the market. And as we started studying the data and really starting to understand, that really wasn't the case at all, but we kept trying to reinforce that to ourselves. And so one of the first techniques you need to do as you sort of anticipate new spaces like this is just get out of your own head and follow the user. So moms were more likely to use VR. This guy's Sid Ballum. He was 85 years old, the first guy to build a kitchen in virtual reality. And it was just so interesting how hard it was for all of us to sort of get our heads around the fact that we were wrong about what the demographic would be. It was much more highly correlated with how big of a purchase you were going to make. How concerned you were about whether or not you were going to make a mistake on a $40,000 kitchen. The second tip is find innovation partners. So if you're in business and you have a new technology, it's yet to be adopted, and you're working with whether it's a major manufacturer or a retailer or a service organization, you have to find a partner that's willing to kind of go kick those doors down with you. And this is a very easy thing to do. If you go into a prospective, you're a brand new product, you go into a prospective partner, and you start to ask questions like, hey, tell me about your innovation program. Tell me about other products that you've taken to market. Or what happened when that last project failed? And if their answer is, oh, we killed it. Right? Or we haven't done a project in a while, or we don't have a system set up. Those are the wrong partners to work with if you're in an emerging space. You need to go find people who have innovation teams, that have a track record of innovation, that have a system and a process, and more importantly, sort of a willingness to sort of try and fail and try again. And so you have to be very selective about that first partner, or you could fail right off the bat. A third tip is you've got to get rid of the concepts of right and wrong and just think about information. And so if your team comes to you, hey, we tried a project, we did an A/B test, it didn't work, we were wrong, you need to very quickly move to, okay, that's fine, what information did we get? And start infusing your organization with the idea of, let's get more information and we'll be right the next time. And so building a culture where information is valued over right and wrong is critical. This one's an interesting one. We have this idea that like the most powerful business people in the world are, prescient, that they have this vision, they're the only ones that know it, they can see it, they're working towards this big vision, and they're working towards this North Star, and they never move. That's a fallacy, and I think it's in part ego. So the lesson here is you pick your North Star, you pick your best decision at the time, you get close to that star, and you see one that's brighter and better, move, and move in a way without shame. You have to be able, and that's not a weakness, that's actually a strength. And so often we sort of hold on to the decisions again because of that, going back to number 2, confirmation bias. And then finally, this is the most important one. There's a personality type within business, which I like to call the "you said" guy. Right? And this is the guy in the meeting that it's a quarter later and he refers back to a decision that was made and ended up being wrong, and he likes to say, "But you said," and it's an insidious personality type, especially when you're trying to do something new and sort of force towards the future, because it will shut down contribution. And so as you get older in your career, you got to start to understand and work around this sort of personality type. But if you allow it to persist in your organization, the younger people who would like to raise their hand and say, "I think this is where it was going," will be shut down very early. And so I use the word drop, but I'd use a more explicative word if I were to say it directly to the contributor. But so where is AR and VR going? So we've talked about augmented reality and we talked about virtual reality. And so I'll share with you today that I think the next major advancement in this space is something called diminished reality, which is the ability to actually delete physical objects from your space. And so imagine in the very near future, you'll be able to go into your living room, circle an object, delete it, place a digital object in its space, and all your decorating will be done through your camera phone. Thank you.